As threatened, this is the Grassy Knoll. And this is for play, I guess, the week of June 4th, as we've been piling up shows on every Monday for you to access as you wish. And boy, I tell you, it doesn't get any less strange. And with that in mind, with a dubious intro, we have with us Kurt Nimmo. And Kurt, I don't know what you're thinking, but welcome back to the Grassy Knoll.
Well, thanks for having me back, Viz.
All right, look, I don't know. It gets curiouser and curiouser. And I want to say one thing, too, before we get into what we promised to be the focus of the show. And I don't know if you listened to the interview, or I guess, maybe it was a rant of mine. I seldom do that. But remember when you wrote me that email about gold and everything, and really what does it matter? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Well, you were right. Did you know that I read that on air and said, yeah, you're pretty much right. Did you know that?
No, I didn't hear that one segment.
No, I mean, what's fair is fair. And you brought forth a number of contentions, if you would, and I think you're right. And I said such. I think I just was saying that I would play for a day when I would hope that the economic holocaust would pass, and I might have something to play with. But yes, and you were right, it may not happen. But we were also hoping that after it all was said and done, there'd be some way we could negotiate, and in fact, that may not be the case. And so what you wrote, and I think I emailed you, I think I did, saying, fair enough, we are looking at a situation that is very grim, but we might be facing that situation anyway, and are any of us prepared perhaps for a life after the big, whatever it happens, depression, whatever we want to call it. So I want you to know that, what you said, maybe others would not want to broadcast or posit or whatever, but no, I read it, and I think you're right. It's not
as hackneyed as it sounds, history repeats itself. You take a look what happened during the Depression. Roosevelt's government confiscated all the gold. They sent police out to people's houses and told them, turn in your gold.
We're not going to belabor this because, like I said, this isn't the core of it. But you know what? The dumbheads at that time believed their government. You know what I mean? And they came in with it. The idiots. I mean, my feeling is like, do you guys want to go house to house across America? Good luck with that. Okay. Be that as it may, but you realize that was a different populace than there is now. Maybe I'm wrong, but after the lessons of history have told us, it's like, you know what, you want me to bring it in? Come and get it, bro.
Yeah.
But you're right.
There's a lot of guns in this country, and people are not as polite as they were during the Depression. That's for sure. But, the mindset of government doesn't change. I mean, they're still going to try by hook or by crook to confiscate all the gold and precious metal.
Yeah, and I think like I said, I probably emailed you, and one of the last case scenarios, and probably it might come to be the one that's most realistic, is that you would be reduced to being the likes of a back alley drug dealer, and you would take your chances. And that's not a great scenario, I know it, but if that's what we're faced with, you got a little thing to play with, but probably not much. My hope, of course, was to try to translate what I have into a piece of property, but Kurt, also with eminent domain and whatever they want to do, it's like, yeah, it's yours until we don't want it to be.
Then not only eminent domain, if we take a look at Agenda 21 and what the United Nations wants to do, they want to quote unquote rewild the country.
Yep.
And they're talking about ferrous oxide detectors in national forests, and and blimps up in the stratosphere with cameras on them. This is a scientific dictatorship we're in right now, and they won't let you go out into the wild. I mean, I hate to sound pessimistic, but take a look around, and that's what you see.
Well, never in our lives, and I'm not going to hold you to an hour, although I don't want to be generous with your time. But I mean, we're doing what I'm doing now. We're free of our constraints a little bit, so we can go out there. I'm with you. You tell me when the game is over, okay?
All right.
Do you remember being a child, and wherever you were, perhaps in Michigan, wherever that was, there was on your independent station in New York, it was WPIX, Channel 11, that used to hold Chiller Theater, and they would have the greatest bad B movies ever. Two things really disturbed me. One movie in which, if you remember, this kid comes running in after all this craziness has happened in the town, and it's trying to tell the law enforcement, don't you understand, the aliens are really here? And if you remember, the camera pulls back, and the cop to whom he's talking has a little bit of a bulge in the back of his neck. And that's the way the movie ends. And there's another one.
Was that, are you thinking of Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
You know, it might have been. I don't know what. But the thing was, it left... But you know where I'm going. It left me with this thing about, oh my God, thank God that's not real. Now, do you remember the one that the movie starts with these kids are sleeping, and at the head of their bed is the window, and this alien craft drops behind a knoll, and that's the way the movie begins. And at the end, after the good guys win, they go to sleep, the parents leave the room, and guess what? The whole thing starts all over again. It's like, was it really a movie? In other words, we are faced, and I've been faced, and I've gotten over it, but it's tough for people to countenance this, and that is, as one jaded comedian said, why did my book of children's stories do well? Because the title was Your Nightmares Are Real. And so what I'm asking you in this whole convoluted presentation I've just given you, there is a time now when I started to say that those fears I had as a kid watching those 2B movies is in fact true. And that is, guess what, folks? Yeah, the deal's rigged, and you are in it. Your take on that?
Oh, definitely. And you know what? It's worse than any 1950s or 1960s B science fiction movie. The technology they have now outdoes anything that they had back then. And but I take it you're talking about the aspect of with the UFO and it being real as opposed to this is not a story, it's real.
Yeah, but you know, it's like you wake up from the nightmare and you realize it's a nightmare, but then you realize that the reality, guess what, was your nightmare, and truly, I guess as Job said, the thing I feared most has befallen me. And we are looking at that right now. You get it, and a lot of people get it, but there's a certain price to pay for your epiphany, and now what do you do with the knowledge that you have?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't get it. They don't see the movie on the screen in front of them. They're so distracted, or for lack of a better word, they're so Stepfordized that they don't see the nightmare in front of them. And if they do, they ignore it. I mean, that's what I encounter every day. Is even with intelligent people, is the fact that they just don't get it.
You know, there was a little glimmer of hope today, if I could offer that. And that is, as you may or may not know, I mean, this is undying truth, but I've worked in a library, and with a whole paso of librarians who are pretty much liberal, but beyond that, whether they're Democrat-leaning or not, they're open to possibilities because, I mean, they just, that's what they do. And one who left us, as I eventually left the university, emailed me just today. By the way, have you encountered, I guess, Cindy Sheehan's?
Yes, I was just thinking about that.
Well, by the way, I emailed Cindy. And that's another thing. But the librarian who's now up in Tallahassee said, you know, I really didn't think you were wrong when we were all together. We gave you the business, and we wanted to believe it weren't so. But she said, of course, as time's gone on, you've proven right. And of course, this is probably one of the last strokes that that will keep me from leaning on what I wanted to believe. And of course, I said, it wasn't my business to try to bring gloom and doom into anybody's life, but only to say, do you want to know the truth or don't you? I take no pleasure in this. I wish I didn't know either, but once you do, you can't unknow it. And she was kind of like right there, and so I did email Cindy Sheehan, and I also attached the poem from Robinson Jeffers, Be Angry at the Sun, which kind of says like, well, what's the problem? Don't you know that this is the nature of republics? Your take on what Cindy Sheehan released, and do you think she finally realized that it's all a game?
Yeah, she finally realized it's all a game. I'm kind of amazed, but then again, I'm not. I'm kind of ambivalent about the whole thing. She should have realized that the Democrats and the Republicans, there's no difference between them. You turn them upside down, they're all the same. All this Pollyanna nonsense in last November of, I had good people emailing me telling me, look, we got to vote for the Democrats, even though we don't want to, because we've got to impeach Bush, and they're talking about impeaching Bush. And I wrote back and said, look, these folks are cut from the exact same cloth. They're not going to impeach Bush. They're not going to bring the troops home from Iraq. They're going to just continue this plan as it's been going on. And it took Cindy a long time to finally realize that that's the truth right there, is the fact that there's no difference between these people. You can't be a Democrat. You can't expect the Democrats to save you. And I don't know. That's all I got. That's all I have to say about her is that, and it's really sad. She's going back to wherever she came from, her hometown, and she's dropping out of politics. And what's really sad is she said in her piece, her letter, or her article that was on Daily Cost that she feels that her son's death is in vain. That's pretty depressing.
Well, you know it, and I know it. It's a tough, in fact, I go silent come Memorial Day because there's no way in the world you can talk to people about it and say, because they're going to say, are you telling me that my husband, my sons, my daughters, my wife's, sacrifice was in vain? And of course it wasn't, because they acted on what they believed to be the truth. But the time has finally got to come when people realize that the governments misuse the military. And, I think back to that song, which has been, of course, sung by Dylan and Peter, Paul, and Mary, when will they ever learn? The answer is never.
Yes, never.
I mean...
Well, I'm not sure what it is exactly. I think it's inherent in the human psychology to want to believe these people.
Of course.
Barnum and what was the circus guy? I can think of his name.
Barnum.
Yeah, Barnum said there's a sucker born every minute. They realize that it's true. I mean, and there's just a few number of people out there that really see through see the man behind the curtain, so to speak, to use the Wizard of Oz metaphor. There's very few people that see that, and, I don't want to climb up on my soapbox and say I'm one of them, but unfortunately I am. And this is a burden to carry to be able to see these things. There's been many times I wish I could just sit back down and go in the cloud and just, forget about it, or not even see it, because it'd be much easier to deal with. That is, up until when, the stuff hits the fan.
Well, our generation especially, who are the parents for the most part of those going off to war, in a way I can't understand, because we understood we never really maybe understood the origins of Vietnam and the way it was all settled. But it was the same beginning, in a sense, nebulous and nobody really sure. All you have to do is tell people it stopped the spread of communism, and you're not, and we're going to make sure they never come here, so to speak. Meanwhile, the southern border is as porous as a bag of oranges,
I think there's a crucial difference, though. Vietnam was kind of amorphous. It kind of just floated in. It was. It didn't come in. The neocons were very theatric. They told us all this stuff. They basically told us what they were going to do, and they did it. They came up with excuses along the way, but they had the theatrics in the United Nations and the spate of Wall Street Journal editorials, and they told us, for those who cared to pay attention, what they were going to do. It wasn't necessarily so during Vietnam. It just, we found ourselves there. Now, again, that could be just me, because I was pretty young and I was distracted by a lot of stuff, and I wasn't necessarily paying attention to politics per se, but it seems like, I don't know, it just seems like this whole thing was, shoved in our faces.
Okay, well, I understand where you're coming from. To me, like I said, I see it as being a redux of what was, but nevertheless, we are there, we are facing something. We're going to probably see a transition of administrations with a war in progress, as we did with Eisenhower's administration into Kennedy's. Not to lead you down a road you don't want to go, but can you see somewhat where we might be obviously getting ready for a Democrat regime and the war somewhat being intensified?
Oh, I think so. I mean, you take a look at, I just posted a video of Norman Podhoretz. Are you familiar with him?
No, I'm not.
Okay, he's a granddaddy to neocons, former Trotskyite. He went on Israeli television last week and said that he had talked to Bush, and Bush will attack Iran before he leaves office. Now, this probably means it will happen in the last 6 months of his administration. And what that means is that that situation will be dumped in the lap of, probably Hillary or who knows who, but and they'll pick the ball up and they'll run with it. It'll be a tag team situation, and it'll just continue. A lot of Democrats will flip over and say, well, our guy's in office now, and maybe Iran is full of terrorists, and we have to deal with them. It's just amazing how easily people are fooled by this stuff. And that's because of their partisanship and the fact they believe in one party over the other. I mean, you take a look what happened, what Clinton did in Serbia, or the former Yugoslavia. There were plenty of Democrats who backed that. They said that Milosevic was a ethnic cleanser, and he was a terrible former commie, and that he deserved to be attacked by NATO and the Clinton administration. But when Clinton left office and Bush did basically the same thing, they went up against him. You didn't hear Democrats whining about these egregious sanctions that were imposed on on Iraq through the whole 90s. Culminating in the death of more than 1 million people. I just think that it's just so easy. I think these people laugh at how easy it is to hornswoggle the American public.
Well, I tell you what, we talk often about how the formula is much the same, and why should they change it? Because it works so well so often. Mm-hmm. By the way, I want to tell people, also we're talking to Kurt Nimmo, and we are, and I've got a little makeshift thing happening here because of continual computer problems, so I'm inclining my head, and I can no longer record on my PC, although I do get things up on the net, and so I'm looking at kurtnimmo.com, and about which Kurt was speaking, and that is Podhoretz, Bush the bombing around before leaving office. Is that correct?
Right. Yes.
All right.
At the bottom of that post, there's a YouTube video, a couple-minute segment of him appearing on Israeli television. Now, he didn't do that in the United States. He went to Israel to do that because that's where his audience is at, is in Israel, because they're the ones that are pushing for this more so than anybody here outside of the neocons. Very scary, very scary. He's convinced that Bush. As a matter of fact, he prefaces his interview with the anchor there in Israel by telling him that he had talked to Bush personally, and he's convinced, though Bush was ambiguous and ambivalent about giving a distinct answer on what he would do, but it was Podhoretz's opinion that Bush would attack Iran towards the end of his last term here.
By the way, I don't know if anything was implicated in this, but that's a heck of a picture of Nancy Pelosi.
I had to fish for that one.
What, did somebody grab her boobs in that shot?
Well, obviously what it is it's easy to make people look like idiots in photographs if you get the picture at the right moment.
Well, that's a prime example. Yeah. What put that?
Well, I think she wears contact lenses. That's why her eyeballs look like that, right?
We'll go along with that story, okay, Kurt? But I ain't buying it. Anyway, and understand how I say this, because I'm in such a bad freaking mood today. But that's okay. It's just another day in the neighborhood, or as you would say, the empire. But I see this stuff all the time come across my emails. Oh, it's Zionists and this and that and the other thing. Now, remember, I have had, people are going to hear this starting Monday, June 4th, and last week I had on Dr. Eugene Norette and Barry Chamish, and of course I'm going to be accused of being blah, 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 and, I'm okay with that, but now what in the world have you done to offend, the entire Jewish community in the Western Hemisphere?
Well, that's overstating the case.
Well...
What happened is I used to write for a website, or actually they just cross-posted my stuff from I don't really write for anybody but myself, and then people come to my blog.
That's why we like you.
Post my stuff. There's too much politics in writing for other people, but we won't go there. That's neither here nor there. But what happened on May 17th, the website in question is Peace, Earth, and Justice in Canada, run by a guy named Chris Cook and another guy called Alan Rycroft. They received a letter from the Canadian Human Rights Commission indicating that the website had violated Canadian law by posting anti-Semitic material on the website, according to a complaint that was filed with the legal department by a guy named Harry Abrams, who's associated with the B'nai B'rith in Canada, in particular in British Columbia. So what happened? This is a serious matter because the Canadian Human Rights Commission has quasi-legal powers in Canada, and they can actually do some harm to you if they decide by going to a tribunal that you are guilty of a hate crime. So what they're doing is they're accusing this website of posting hate crime literature, and what's going to happen is right now is the Canadian Human Rights Commission is going to make a determination on what's going to happen in that case. They're accusing the website of violating the human rights of the Jewish community in Canada. Now, the articles in question have nothing to do with the Jewish community in Canada. It has to do with the policies of the Israeli state vis-a-vis the Palestinians. As a matter of fact, I'm one of the writers that they accuse of anti-Semitism with a bunch of other. Let me look at my notes here. We got
yeah, that's okay.
Chris Hedges, James Petrius. I don't know if you ever heard of him. Kathleen and Chris. Jason Miller. And these are some pretty well-known people in the blogosphere. Paul De Rouge, Israel Shamir.
Oh yeah, Shamir. Yeah.
And a bunch of other people, a few other people I've never heard of before. But they're accusing them of anti-Semitism, and in Canada, this is a pretty heavy charge to face.
Well, you know what I can't understand is I don't know if you know Charles Wilcox, who's the author of Transformation of the Republic. Okay, if you don't know, he's from Calgary. And he's been in very, very constant contact and in-depth contact with me. And he sends me programming, and he sends me down VHSs. And so often it seems that Canada, especially with its CBC, is much more egalitarian and revealing than what our, PBS or anything is down here. And then yet, on another note, just as you have said, it seems that they get like hypersensitive and crazy about, I guess what you don't even know what anti-Semitism means. In fact, did they grab Zundel out of Canada or the United States?
He was deported from Canada.
Yeah, I mean
he was arrested here in Tennessee. He lived with his wife in Tennessee.
Right.
And he was grabbed by the authorities here. He was deported to Canada because he had come from Canada.
Right.
He had emigrated from Germany to Canada, and then he met his wife and moved to the United States. They deported him to Canada.
Right.
Canada subsequently sent him to Germany to face charges of Holocaust denial.
I mean, not that I should associate you with him. I just don't know. Do you know where he's at right now?
He's serving 3 years in a German prison.
All right.
For Holocaust denial.
Okay.
In other words, a thought crime.
Yeah, I got you. No doubt about it. Now, look, I'm not going to lump you in with anybody else, but the thing is, what do you feel you said that was so inflammatory? Or wrote?
They have quotes here. Let me look through here. That they had put in this. Matter of fact, they kind of. It seems like Chris Cook and I are the ones that they're really picking on here. I talked about the London Mayor Livingstone, who had made a comment about a Nazi concentration camp guard. In another article, I talked about the ethnic cleansing of South Lebanon during the war last year, or the invasion, I should say. What else was there? And I documented the torture at the same time in Israeli prisons of Lebanese nationals who were captured in Lebanon and sent back to Israeli prisons and tortured. So to them, this is a hate crime. To point this stuff out as a hate crime, their criteria is, I'll read it to you here, that they say that they have problems when people blame only Israel and its policies for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, when people indict Israel's legitimate counterterrorism measures with no reference or condemnation of Palestinian terrorism, when people deny or undermine Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state in the Middle East. Now realize, of course, that I'm not guilty of any of these things. I haven't said any of this stuff. In particular, I've never said that Israel doesn't have a right to exist. I believe it does have a right to exist. I just think it needs parity with the Palestinians. But that's neither here nor there. Employ existentially threatening language, such as referring to Israel as a racist or apartheid state, and apply terms such as ethnic cleansing to the conflict. When criticisms are based upon inaccurate media information or Palestinian Authority propaganda, predetermine the outcome of direct bilateral negotiations in keeping with UN Resolution 242 and 338, or circumvent such a process. Now, from what I've read going through this website, none of this is applicable. Obviously, a lot of people don't look at the Palestinian side. It's true. They have a thugocracy in occupied territories. I don't deny that. But when you compare that with what the Israeli state has done to the Palestinian people for the last 50 years, 60 years, it doesn't measure up. So they're being rather disingenuous, to say the least, to accuse, these authors of anti-Semitism. It's ludicrous, quite frankly.
Well, as I've said often, and as I get emails often, on any given day I can be accused of being a ADL spook and an anti-Semite, mainly because I look at the state of Israel, and if you can say, does it have the right to exist? Well, it's another created nation like just everything else. I guess it's okay. It's done. But are you asking me whether or not I think it's an extension of the Old Testament nation of Israel? In fact, it was funny. Now, maybe it's a bad choice of words. But even Chamish, when he came out last week, he said, why in the world do they even call it Israel? It should be called Judah, because of the 10 tribes that split away from the two.
And that's the canard that the Jewish community here and in Israel uses, that God set aside this land for these people,
No.
That's, regardless of the brutality they're inflicting on the original indigenous, and it depends on how far back you want to go to say indigenous, population that lives there. We can't deny that they're occupying their land and they're doing all kinds of brutal things to the Palestinian people. That's my only beef with the Israeli state, is what they're doing is the occupation and the brutality they're inflicting on those people over there.
But Kurt, are we allowing the main culprit to slide out the back door while we argue over what's supposed to be the main events? And that is this. And I asked Barry and I asked Dr. Norette the same thing. And they felt, I won't go in the whole 9 yards. The archives are out there for whoever wants to listen to it. But it's like, what in the world and why in the world did Britain poke its fat ass down there for so long, and obviously, especially in the 20th century? Who gave them the right to go in there and carve out the states that they did? And then it seems to me, as they always have done in the 20th century, and I'm not talking about the British people, I'm talking about the government, I'm talking about the military that's been abused by the Rothschilds, and that is, who gave you any kind of imprimatur from above to come down there and play havoc with this place? And you know what I see now? And this is what I was referring to about what the modus operandi has been for Britain's government and military. They are slip-sliding away, and guess what dumb jerk beast is in there still? Us. Now, do you want to bounce off that at all?
Well, this is, you could say, historically, this is the legacy of British colonialism, and of course, Britain wasn't the only one meddling in the neighborhood. The French had a lot to do with it.
And the Germans, too, yeah.
And the Germans, and even the Russians. All of them went in there. They realized there were a lot of natural resources, of course, oil. But it's the legacy of colonialism that did that. Now with Rothschild, I mean, you take a look at what did Rhodes do in Africa? You know, I mean, for some diamonds.
That's right.
Same thing.
It was, definitely.
You know, it's all the same. It's the legacy of European colonialism, and I don't want to be too didactic and go off on a tangent about that. But
why not?
Well, because a lot of it is bullshit. Excuse my French, but you know, a lot of it doesn't stack up. I mean, you take a look at the plans that have been going on for hundreds of years. You know, in regard to the bankers. You know, we talk about Rothschild. We use him as an example. The British Empire is, you know, it doesn't necessarily fit the model, the historical model that we see of British colonialism. You know. You can take it all the way back to what was it, the
British East Indies?
Precisely.
Okay.
Precisely. It's mercantile capitalism, you know, on steroids, and it's the international bankers who are the ones that are responsible for perpetuating this stuff on people all across the world. But in regard to Israel, I you know, personally see that as a beachhead for the bankers. You know, they need to. That is one of the last refuges of you know, most of the world has been subdued. You know, you take a look at how many, 1 billion Muslims. You know, you know, and what does the Quran say? What does the Old Testament say? What does it say about usury?
Not good.
You know, it's not good. It's forbidden.
No.
And that's what the international bankers think. They want to send the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank in there, and they want to get these people in debt and steal their natural resources. But it hasn't happened to date. I mean, so Israel's a beachhead, and I think Barry Chamish has said this as well, that the so-called what we call the NWO are going to betray the Israelis as well. I mean, nobody's on their side. Everybody's a dump, you know. So.
Well, Robert Burke, who's a listener to the show and has to travel globally, was out of Toronto. Just a really good guy. I mean, he's one of these people who doesn't have an agenda. It's just like, this is what I see, this is what's going on, and I don't know, you know, where does it all fall down? I mean, he's an intelligent guy and just a great brother. But anyway, one of the statements he made to me after he came back from a trip, I guess, which brought him through Europe into China, he says, it's amazing. Those with whom we fight today, we will trade with tomorrow.
That's right.
And does nothing say it better with regard to what's going to happen. And let me ask you this, Kurt, too. Well, I mean, my adjurations against Britain is not, like I said, not against their people, but, you know, there is a mechanism there that has foisted and fomented and agitated all the time. And even in Quigley's Tragedy and Hope, when I read about what Britain did, and it almost seemed like it reversed things and started to give the Arabs, if you will, the Palestinians, if that was a name for them at that time, an upper edge to the point where Israel nearly went to war with Britain, and it's like, this is not making sense to me, but the whole thing doesn't make really sense. So now I went on the digression on that. But to go back to whatever my point was originally, with Robert Burke, and that is, we really are in a situation where it's becoming more and more, I guess, apparent to those who get it, that it's all about money, and war is all about lining the pockets of bankers and industrialists, and in the ruins of whatever nation is destroyed, or how many are destroyed, they'll still come in and make money and look like saviors.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. They're playing the two sides off against each other, and what they do is they use the Hegelian dialectic of what is a problem-solution, or where they create the problem, then
fathom the response and provide the solution.
Correct.
Right.
And in that process, they make billions of dollars. So, you know, you take a look at the British occupying, I mean, you know, they went in there, you know, for centuries, the Ottoman Empire controlled that place. Those were all provinces of the Ottoman Empire. They weren't called Palestinians. They were just, another province in the Ottoman Empire. And when the British figured out that they could defeat the decadent and corrupt, sheikhs of, or not, they weren't sheikhs, but the leaders of the Ottoman Empire, they turned that situation on its head. And, and what happened is that the Zionists who came flooding in there after World War II, and actually before that, started their own revolution against the British. And I think the British planned that as well. Once again, conquer and rule and divide. The United Nations came in there and declared a state of Israel, and that's what Rothschild wanted. 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, quickly will only tell you what he's allowed to tell you. We can also figure out things from what we've seen. Again, I'm not singling out Britain for any other reason, but it was at the behest of certain forces. I think the Rothschilds were one. I think the Vatican was another. What the thing that disturbs me so much, as it applies to our country, especially at this very timely moment, I guess, with Memorial Day just being 24 hours away, and that is, most wars were probably preventable, but they were agitated by bankers and industrialists. Probably people could have worked things out okay if they were not involved. But as I see it now, and especially the 20th century, and this is what I fear, and you don't need to speak to this, but boy, I'd like to hear you weigh in on it. And that as I've looked back at our country, and it's supposed to have been God-breathed, it was not. I mean, our founders were lawyers and elites. It was the same have-not things. And we've been poisoned by these fairy tales as well, with adulterated history books. But what I fear is this, is that we've had a good standard of living. I think you would agree for most of us, of course, that doesn't help those who've been in poverty. However, were we fatted and prepared for a time that is to come, and now that time is upon us? In other words, what other army, what other military, Kurt, has been all over the joint in the 20th century as we go into the 21st? I mean, did we get fatted to become the hitman, the Fight Club, number one?
Yeah. I mean, we're fattened up like a $50 whore, We were used up and then cast on the pile with the rest of the world. I mean, these guys don't care about anybody. They're psychopaths, All they care about is themselves and their own agenda. And, yeah, we're next. I mean, I see the great leveling coming on, and that's what neoliberalism and globalism is all about, is this grand feudalism that they want to impose on the whole planet, And China is the model. They want to turn the rest of the world into a slave labor gulag based on the Chinese model. And that's my take on it. That's what they want to do. And so they're doing it. They have to do it incrementally. Otherwise, people are going to go in the streets, They brainwash the next generation. I mean, I don't want to, it's kind of a stereotype to look down at the coming up generation. But man, these guys are dumbed down, man. This generation is ready for it, and the one that follows them will be even more so. I mean, so they're doing it incrementally. I don't even know if it'll happen in our time. But they got their agenda and they're pushing forward with it. All you got to do is look at the Security and Prosperity Partnership nonsense and the North American Union to see that this is what they're going to do. They're NAFTA-izing the whole North American continent. My standard of living has slipped over the last 30 years, that's for sure, so has everybody else.
Well,
except the small number of people that are rich.
I did a couple of things today. As I think I said to you, I emailed Ms. Sheehan, and I said, you were used, have you woken up? And I sent her that poem by Robinson Jeffers. I also emailed somebody who sent me some other information, and I said, look, what is the problem? Don't you get it? The fix is in. We have two parties that fake it, that they are different, but they are in fact not. I had somebody in an email group that has to deal out, with health, and I shut my mouth because there's really nothing to say. But then they came in wondering what the heck this illegal immigration was about, and some idiot came in and said, well, we Americans want everything to happen. I mean, I'm not even going to go with that was that. I just sent back an email with regard to, you folks have no idea really what's going on. This is part of a greater agenda, and you don't want to hear about it. You think it's conspiracy theory. It's not. It's conspiracy fact. And I said to him, if you want to read the white paper that the CFR has drafted, and I went in all to the origins of the CFR, about the North American Union. Do you want to understand that that's going on and why you don't know anything about it? And if so, don't get mad at me. Get mad at Fox. Get mad at CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, NPR. Now, I wonder what's going to come back with that. So I had myself a pretty good day today, but I was left with just wanting to tear out every window and you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it gets to you, and I know it gets to you too. I mean, we share emails at times in the later hours of the day, I guess, when we get to be real with one another, because it does get to you. But you just can't stop. You can't unknow what you know, Kurt, can you?
No way, and it's in your face when you know what to look at. And I think, pray tell, I believe there's a lot of people out there who know it, see it, but don't look at it, don't want to know it, become ostriches and stick their head in the sand. But by and large, the vast majority of the population are entertained by bread and circuses, and they don't know if they're coming or going. I mean, even I talk to intelligent people I work with. I tell them about the North American Union. I tell them about immigration and how we're being, how these millions of illegal, so-called illegal immigrants are being brought into this country to bring down our standard of living, and their eyes glaze over. They don't want to hear it. It's like I'm from Mars, I mean, so, and I'm not talking about dullards here. I'm talking about people that are relatively intelligent, and so, the greatest thing that the globalists, the elite, have done has brainwashed the American people, and I like to use the word Stepfordized because that's what they are. They're. And people read my blog, and I go on about this, and they say, well, who the hell do you think you are, I mean, well, how come you're so high on your horse? Well, no, it's like you said. We see this stuff. We're giving out a clarion call to our brothers and sisters out there, who we share some affinity with, at least, and they don't want to hear it. After a while, it's like banging your head against a cement wall. You're going to stop, I mean. But as far as being able to see it, it's too late to turn back and sit down and shut up and watch American Idol. I mean.
Well, what do you think about this one issue? Because I think this is the most glaring, and eventually will awaken people. It may be too late. My buddy Pilot Pete up in New Jersey, a lifetime friend. We've gone back and forth, and he knows me too well to know that I'm not Wackading Hoy. But he also doesn't want to really know in conspiracies, and yet, as time's gone on, he's got nothing else really to say except, yeah, okay. With this last one, I said to him, well, Pete, I mean, you see it right in front of you. Where did the United States get stupid in its last, 20 years, that we can't figure out how to seal off the borders, while in Canada, they're working feverishly on some kind of sensor detection network along the 49th parallel that will keep any bad people from coming in. I'm like, okay, so what do we do on the southern border? And he understands this. I'm going, now, does this make any sense to you? He said, no. I said, unless for one reason, and that is to destroy America. And you have a hard time believing it, right, Pete? And he goes, yeah, I do. But you know what? It's an issue that's sitting right in front of people, and right now they're stewing, wondering how in the world, all of a sudden, we got too dumb. And it's not a thing about Latinos. Give me a freaking break. It's about illegal immigration, okay? That it's coming from the South, that's the way it is. It's not an ethnic thing. It's like, why is this happening? So, Kurt, do you believe, though, that people have a little problem with this, and if you work in the North American Union, maybe they got a little problem with that, too, and yet on the Council on Foreign Relations website, they got their 70-page white paper, Building a North American Community. Go, read it, folks. What's the problem?
They're not going to read it. They're not going to pay attention until it's on CNN or Fox News. I mean, it obviously won't be there at all. My take on the border is if they build a wall, it'll be to keep us in and not them out.
Exactly.
I mean, and take a look at this immigration bill they're working on. They're talking about vetting workers through Social Security. Well, in order to do that, we have to have a new Social Security card. Well, what kind of Social Security card? Well, a biometric Social Security card, of course, So it's incremental. They get us used to this, You don't want to, problem reaction solution again, All the immigrants are flooding in. Well, we need to have IDs for everybody so that the illegal immigrants don't take our jobs, which is nonsense, obviously. But it's another way for them to sneak in their agenda. Their agenda is to tag us all like cattle, and that's what they're going to eventually do. Borders don't matter. I mean, once you've got an RFID tracking and you got satellites and GPS tracking, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you go. You read Philip K. Dick's Minority Report, and I don't think it was called Minority Report, but that was what the movie was called, made upon it. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at all of us being chipped and monitored and watched constantly. And once that happens, game over.
Well, let me throw this by it, because I just started to realize this. There's a time when all of us who are kind of like in tune, and even if we aren't, I mean, just people who observe things every day, you realize, when certain terms come into vogue through advertising, you realize when certain fashions come in. But the one thing that just got really glaringly obvious to me is in the last week or two, have you noticed people who are walking around with this thing planted in their ear like a board?
No, I haven't.
Oh, Christmas. And I asked
Is it ornamentation or,
Well, let's put it this way. It's an ornate cell phone. Where now...
I know what you're talking about. Those are Bluetooth devices.
And
right. They're wireless devices. Yeah, they've been around for a while. Yeah, once again, getting people used to, wearing this hardware, this radio technology hardware on their bodies, And I'm convinced that this, this trend of tattooing and body piercing and scarification is all part of the same agenda to get this younger generation used to having things stuck in their body. Now, of course, people are going to say I'm a conspiracy nut, I'm wearing my tinfoil hat, but it just seems that's the way it is,
But the thing is, two things, okay? On the comical side of it, I'm looking at this like the Night of the Living Dead, only through my goggles can I see these people, and I look at them going, folks, first of all, they look like Borgs. It's like half Borgs to me. The next thing will be like half their head or something like that. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, this is like in the supermarket, And why am I going to the supermarket? Me, the vegan? Because that's where I buy Rolling Rock beer, okay? But I look at these people, but I'm going, what in the world are you doing? And two, I'm saying to myself, at this stage of my life, and these people are often as old as I am or older, I'm going, why in the world do you want to be kept in touch with all the time? When I get in my pickup truck and go to the store, leave me alone. And these characters are walking around with this thing, and it's like, oh, we can't understand why they got brain cancer. That's another thing. But you see...
I'm getting brain cancer right now. I'm talking on a cell phone,
Okay. Well,
I have a cell phone because it's, and I hate to say this, I'm going to sound like a total idiot, but it's more convenient for me to take telephone calls on a cell phone than a landline. I don't take it with me in the car to the store. That's true. But I can talk to you and walk out on the back porch and watch the sun go down. Now, that's an excuse, obviously, but I realize what I'm sticking up against my head, doesn't make me any more intelligent, but that's neither here nor there. No. What I was going to say about this technology is that they have the Bluetooth devices in their ears. What's the next step? It's a microchip. It's a brain implant. Don't ever miss a call. Have it right in your brain. I don't know.
But my point is that I'm going to become a Luddite. As things go on, I'm going to go backwards. And my desire is that eventually what will happen is, I'll have a computer as a word processor, screw the internet, all that, leave me alone. When they come for me, and they come for all of us, I'll understand when they do. From that point on, I just don't want to be kept in touch with. I value...
Well, Viz, you're not going to be able to afford to have an internet connection in another 5 years. They're talking about Internet 2 and gated communities and metering and pay-as-you-go and turning the internet that we now have into, cable television, with 150 channels and nothing on, And that's what they want to do. They want to get rid of this venue that we have where we're able to relate to each other and talk and relate information to each other. They're working on that as well. We're talking, I read yesterday in the newspaper that they're talking about next year internet taxes. Now, this comes and goes around periodically, but I think this time they're serious. They're talking about email taxes and, controlling the internet more. The United Nations, no, it's not the United Nations, it's what I call the Gang of Eight, which is the G8, are talking about, dealing with terrorism on the internet. It needs to be monitored and controlled. So, it doesn't take much to figure out what these guys are up to. They're going to get rid of the internet that we know, and when they do that, I won't have an internet connection either.
No, I think there'll come a time, and I got an email from somebody who's a Christian and said, well, if you believe what you believe, then everything's a distraction. Ron Paul and this whole thing. I go, yeah, it is. But the thing is, the reason I do what I do, and I'm saying this, not you, obviously, Kurt, and that is, I think people should understand what's coming down. And that's it. I'm on the watchtower, nobody's asking me to do that. That's okay. But that's the reason why I do it. But if you're asking me, is there going to be a Deus Ex Machina, some cavalry that comes riding with a white hat? No. Now, I don't know your spiritual leanings, but to me, I mean, I think I have something to look forward to. But you're not going to turn this thing around, and so therefore, let's go to the, if you don't mind, the supposedly hot button topic about Ron Paul. Is it going to happen?
No, he's not even going to get the Republican nomination. They're shutting him out of the debates. They're shutting him down. And I wrote an article which a lot of people sent me email disagreeing with. And in my article, I said, or in my blog entry, I said, look, during the debates, from what I understand, I did not watch the debates, but I followed up in the papers the next day or on the internet. Ron Paul said that Al Qaeda and 9/11 were blowback from our foreign policy.
I heard it.
Not an inside job, not an agenda, to terrorize the American public, but blowback, And I said, I disagree with that. I think Ron Paul's wrong. I will not vote for a man who buys into a load of crapola, into the same old thing. I said, if he sincerely believes that, then I can't back him.
No, I heard when he said the reason they attacked us is because we've been meddling in their affairs. And I'm like, okay, they and their refer to Arabs, so therefore you telling me the 19 Arab hijackers were responsible for 9/11, which I'm assuming he did, and that's when I said, have a nice day.
Well, he mostly concentrated on Osama bin Laden, the phantom Osama bin Laden, who I believe is dead at this point, who was a documented CIA asset in Afghanistan. And he admits as much, but he's not willing to accept the in-your-face conclusion that this was an inside job, that there's plenty of historical documentation, including Operation Northwoods, which indicates that they're capable of this stuff, and that government is truly, sincerely evil and run by psychopaths. So my conclusion is that I can only conclude that it's an inside job due to my historical understanding of what government does and what it is. Regardless of the fact that the whole, hijackers in the Afghan, the cave-dwelling Afghan, terrorists is totally ludicrous. But, how am I, and there's a lot of people in the 9/11 community, speak up with folks around that, who believe that, we have to put this kind of stuff aside in order to get this libertarian in office, which is never going to happen, folks. I hate to break it to you, but he may get some good information out there, but it's going to go over most people's heads. And, it looks good, for the moment, but he's not going to get in there. And it's like I've always said, if a really, truly decent person got in office, he'd be killed the next day. They'd assassinate him, so... But, the point is that Ron Paul is not the answer.
No.
I agree with some of the stuff he says. I have libertarian leanings myself, as far as, vis-a-vis government and its size and what it does, and the Federal Reserve and taxation and the whole litany of stuff. But if he is clueless, and people write me emails saying he's not clueless.
No, he's not.
He knows that it's an inside job, that he's not bringing that up because he'd be immediately painted as a tinfoil hat nutcase, a kook, written off like everybody else who talks about 9/11. And my response was, okay, so then he's not a man of his word. He's just as deceptive as the rest of the gang.
Mm-hmm. When you can't speak the truth because you need to get a little further in before you can, the point's clear. You can't speak the truth. It's over with.
I can't vote for a guy that doesn't speak the truth.
But I don't know how you feel about this, but one of the things I wrote in my weekly column, because I'll be unemployed very shortly, by the way, but that's okay, in the newspaper, was I copied in what James Traficant had told the House on the floor of the House about what really runs things. And, as much as he, like I said, looked like a nutcase, and he eventually got sent up the river with racketeering. Well, what he said, I can't find a problem with. And the fact is, he told it like it was, and he got disappeared. Ron Paul, and on the other hand, talks tough on Alex Jones' show, as I've said many times, and he goes into the district of criminals, and he plays nice with everybody. If he told people where it's at, he'd get disappeared too. He doesn't want to do that. He's nobody's savior.
They'd find something. They'd find a pedophile charge, or $800,000 in his freezer or whatever. They'd find something. They'd find a skeleton to get rid of him.
But the point is,
he's playing nice. He's playing nice, and that's why they allow him.
Right.
They allow him, and he's a foil to bounce off this thug Giuliani, who, God, man, looks like a mafia, Don to me.
Try Himmler.
And Himmler and this Manchurian candidate, John McCain. My God, and these guys are atrociously. They're like crime family figures, And, but I'm wandering off and being disparaging. I guess I shouldn't do that.
Why? We love that on our show. Wander and be disparaging. We live on this on the Grassy Knoll.
Well, that's how I feel. I'm speaking my mind, and when I try to do this with my coworkers and my neighbors and whoever else, like I said, they glaze over it. They think I'm a nutcase, and quite frankly, the majority of the American people feel that way. We're doomed. Sorry, folks. I hate to say it. I want to be Pollyannish, and I want to, not be Chicken Little and say the sky's falling. But if we don't get our act together by 2010 at minimum, we're cooked.
And I know you feel in your heart, and I'm putting these words in your mouth, but I'll say it for myself. It ain't going to happen, and we are cooked. However, there's a chance to fight for another day, I guess. And I don't know why people would go on. For myself, I believe there's something afterward. But still in all, and Kurt, I think a lot of people feel this way too. And in the end, and you hear this, spoken about so many times, when you bring back 9/11, well, why would you besmirch the memory? Look, if my father, my mother, my sister, my brother were downed in the towers, I want to know why that happened. I don't want to hear anything else except why it happened. And I
want to know why the remains were put in potholes in New York. That's what I want to know. Talk about. It's bad enough that they lied to the people about the toxicity of the air at Ground Zero, and what happened to people are keeling over from lung disease and weird diseases from these heavy metals and whatnot. And that alone, but. Talk about disrespecting the dead. My God, man, they just put these people in potholes. It's macabre. It's macabre, and it's disgusting and sickening. And with people like this running the government, I don't know what we can do. Once upon a time, people were so outraged they got pitchforks and marched on the castle. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah, I know. Alan Watt would say that's why they gave us the vote.
Well, he's absolutely right.
He is. Right. We vote. We think we got a chance, and we don't go ahead and storm the Bastille.
And we fall for it every time.
Every time.
Every time. I had people. I won't mention any names. During the last the midterm election, saying you got to vote for Democrats because we got to impeach Bush. And I'm saying, are you flipping crazy? We're not going to impeach Bush. He's not going anywhere.
Oh no.
And the Democrats, the Pelosi and Reid and the rest of them are going to betray you. They're going to stab you in the back. Oh, no, we got to hope. And one of these people, I'll mention his name, is Webster Tarpley.
I know.
Yeah. He's an old activist from the 60s. He believes that activism works. It doesn't work anymore, folks. These guys have built such an edifice that there's no penetration. They're laughing at us with our marches and our radio hosts with bullhorns out in the street. They're laughing at us,
Mm-hmm. I agree. And of course, if we can get into this one moment, if you don't mind. Here's something I thought that they were going to pull the card out, and they didn't. But recently, it's starting to come forward, and I understand why. And that is this. Now, first of all, do you remember when Congress declared war in 1941? You remember it happening, right?
Well, they had a declaration of war, bona fide, an actual declaration of war that they haven't had since.
Very good. Now, all right. Now, this is another side argument, but I think you would be intrigued by this. We can talk about this at another time. One of the things we had a guest by the name of the Informer on, who has information on wtihpress.com, and one of the things that I was looking at. I mean, I had him on, and he didn't lead me to this, but I started looking around, going, why did we have a declared war for Korea and Vietnam and blah blah blah? And I wrote him one time. I'm going, let me get this straight. They declared war in 41. Did the War Powers Act ever get rescinded? And the I-Man, if you allow me to call him that, said no. I'm like, so is that why they never have to declare war again? Because, we're always at war? He went, yeah. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, it makes absolute sense. In 1947, they set up the national, the NSA,
the National Security Council, or the NSA?
Truman signed they created the CIA and the NSA.
The NSA, okay.
The National Security State, as it's called. They did that in 1947, right after the Second World War, and we've been at war ever since. We never demobilized.
Nope.
We went into Korea, and we went into Guatemala, and we went into
Nicaragua, Vietnam,
Cambodia, and and El Salvador, and Nicaragua, and you name it. We went into all these places. And we have ever since. We've been it's perpetual war for perpetual peace, and it's highly profitable for the bankers.
But this is another reason why, when I write to other people, I'm going, look, our military, they're you and me. They do what they feel is right because that's what they're told to do, and you cannot fault them for it. There are some who may know and who may like it, and that's okay. But for the most part, there's no reason for this to take place. But the thing is, what I've said to a number of people, and that is, look, you figure out what nation has had its troops deployed across more nations. Do you think that they're not looking at us as a Fourth Reich? Is China all over the joint? Is Russia all over the joint? No matter what we feel about them, they're not anywhere, but we are. So what do you think people are going to turn around and say about us?
Yeah. There was a scene in, I watched the movie, I can't remember. It's about the guy who was in the CIA from the beginning.
The Good Shepherd?
The Good Shepherd. There's a scene in there where they grab a Russian defector and they feed him LSD. Okay, and it's kind of a hodgepodge of actual events that happen. He ends up jumping out a window like
Frank Olson?
Yeah, like Frank Olson. But anyway, when he's on LSD and they're trying to get him to confess who he works for, if he's a Russian mole, he says, "You people had it all wrong." He said, "Russia was nothing but rust with paint over it. It was never a threat to your country. You created it."
That's right.
To keep your military-industrial complex going. And I went, bingo, this is amazing. This is in this movie. It was one line out of the whole movie, or one section of several lines out of the movie, but that spoke truth, And I'm amazed sometimes what I find in Hollywood movies,
A great point, but I wonder how many people will really appreciate that remark and remember it.
Very few.
All right, one other thing, if you don't mind, if we can go on with this, and that's another thing that's always kind of mystified me. You know that we go everywhere to fight the axis of evil, whether it be, we haven't gone into North Korea, we go off to the Middle East and such, and there's one nation that supposedly hates our guts, who had cannons pointed at us and everything else, and that is what? Cuba. Now, okay.
Yeah, right.
Now, the other thing is this. We were just watching, Lady Viz and I, a little PBS thing about the whole liberation thing, and it was a great chronicle of events. But, I sit there and I watch, and we talk back and forth, and so I want to throw this out to you. First of all, I believe Castro knew the handshake and knew that Cuba was going to be left alone for another day. That Che Guevara didn't get it and really thought the revolution was the real deal, goes off to South America and, of course, gets assassinated, if you would agree with that. Yeah. Okay. So the thing I'm laughing at is that, look, Cuba has been left alone by this country for a particular reason, which might be to our demise later on. But don't tell me that we can go off and fight, fight in Iran, Iraq, or whatever, and leave that nation alone, given what we call the MO on bad guys. What do you think about the very interesting relationship, or lack thereof, between the United States and Cuba?
Well, once again, we like to create enemies, if they're paper tigers or facades or not. And Cuba is definitely that. I believe that Cuba definitely had a sincere revolution in the late 50s. I think that Castro was bought out by the communists who controls them. They're all, it all goes back to the bankers and the Rothschilds. It's all part of it. It's yin and yang of the same thing. So yeah, he's a corrupt dictator. We like dictators, no matter if they're supposedly communist or whatever stripe they happen to be. We like them. Now we keep up pretenses. Of course, people can't go there. There's an embargo. Blah blah blah. But it's just another straw man to throw up and say, look, those damn commies down there, when at the same time, they agree, to a certain extent. It's hard to pin the tail on the donkey, so to speak, because at the same time you have Fidel Castro, before he got sick, cavorting off with Hugo Chavez with all his oil down there, So, and then Hugo Chavez went to visit Saddam Hussein prior to the invasion, and so it's convoluted. You follow the money, you follow the power lines, they all go back to the same place.
Well, I'll tell you what. Would you agree that if you did a dossier and a rundown on all that Cuba represented, if you took Cuba's name out and put any other nations in, we'd be all over them like a cheap suit?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
So it makes me...
Cuba is not a big deal. There's not much there. They got some fruit and bananas and it's a good place to go on vacation in January, and we're not interested in Cuba really, except for that perennial enemy that we throw up occasionally and say, see, we oppose tyranny everywhere, which is nonsense. We're more interested in places like Iran and Iraq and places that have stuff, stuff that we can that the neoliberals can go in and hold a fire sale and sell it all off.
Well, I'll tell you what. Chavez does bring back memories of when Castro was doing the yada yada and the finger pointing and the arm waving. And as we watched that PBS documentary, Lady Viz and I kind of looked at each other and going, okay, so what's the story now? And Chavez seems to be much Castro-like, and I think he knows the handshake too. Well, I tell you what, we'd like to believe this. By the way, I don't. But that he shook off the bonds of the IMF and the World Bank and such is very interesting to me. And we've had Bob Chapin on it, and Chappie, for some reason, believes that this is the real deal. And I'm going, but Bob, all throughout history, if you screw with the bankers, your ass is grass. So either Chavez is being very theatric, as he's told to be, or he's absolutely out of his mind, and he's going to find himself, committing suicide with 3 self-inflicted gunshot wounds.
Right. You have to keep in mind that Hugo Chavez is a tin-horn dictator, just like the rest of them. Sure, he's into, I can't think of the brand of socialism down there.
Marxist?
No, not Marxist. It's indigenous Bolivian revolution. I can't think of the guy's name. They call it... At any rate, it's slipping by me right now.
Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid or what?
No.
I know.
Well, it's that time period, actually. They kicked the Spanish out of there, and, there was a form of socialism, but that got bought out. The point being is that, the longer these guys are around, the longer they stay in control and in power, you end up with Mexico. You end up with a corrupt dynasty of small elitist families. And it was like that there before, but it's time to spin the roulette wheel, and throw the marble in and see where it lands. He doesn't pose a threat. Look at these guys. They're sitting on oil, They're capping it, And shutting down refineries to jack the prices up. I don't know about you, but we're paying $3.50 a gallon here in Mexico. And the point is that they need their little guys to scare us with, actually Chavez may be a patsy for all I know. He may actually believe what he believes, I'll tell you one thing. The people, the campesinos and the poor people in the barrios in that country are doing better now under him than they were under the corrupt elite. That were, kowtowing to the Wall Street bankers. But yeah, I mean, who knows where it's going to go? Who knows whose tune he dances to? I wouldn't be surprised in the least if he turns out just to be another Castro.
Well, I'm banking on it. Excuse the pun. Well, let me ask you this also. You are in New Mexico, no doubt.
Yes, I'm in New Mexico.
And, bro, I mean, don't you feel a little bit like I should get out of Dodge real soon?
Yes, definitely, I can't. At this point, I'm too impoverished.
Okay.
I like an idiot, I bought a house 5-6 years ago, before I really woke up. And I'm locked into that sucker now, I mean, I guess I could abandon it, but, this place is going to change. It's going to change radically in the next 5 years, It already is 60% Latino, and it has been that way for decades. But this influx of illegals coming in here is really going to change the landscape down here in a big way in the next couple of years. It already is.
But yeah,
get out of Dodge. I wish I could get out of Dodge.
Well, I mean, you would if you felt. I mean, you were definitely, and you and your family were in peril, which we all might be to a certain extent every day, and I understand that. And let me say this: even though I'm in Florida and it's surrounded by water, don't get anything wrong that this is a border state, and illegals are welcome.
You've got hundreds of miles of coastline where anybody can come into there. It's easier to come in Florida than probably across the. We have a foreboding, deadly desert here that people have to trek across, and they die doing so.
Mm-hmm. No, and I mean, I'll tell you straight up. I mean, I want out of here. There's no two ways about it. Now, whether it happens or not, I don't know. There are certain contingencies, just like you said yourself. But I feel like I got a little bit more time, and that might be incorrect as far as what you have. But at this time where you are, and you're a very intuitive person, very aware, so far. Are you feeling like you're not necessarily endangered by nefarious sorts?
No, not yet. Not yet. I'll tell you what, though, it's strange living here. About 6 months ago, I had 3 guys show up on my doorstep, and I came out and I said, "No habla español," because I don't speak Spanish, and they were right. They had, I'm 40 miles from Mexico here, and it was obvious they were looking for a contractor here. They had come over the border. That was just happened to show up on my doorstep. The Border Patrol around here is a joke, They patrol the borders. They're told you can't shoot if you're shot at by Mexican drug dealers. You can't do anything. You can harass white people at checkpoints. That's about what they do here,
Well,
and other minorities. I mean, you go through this place is chock full of checkpoints, and they're gratuitous checkpoints. And every time you go through, you see some Asian guy or a black guy or some poor white trash being shook down by the
jacked up.
Yeah, So it's a joke, and everybody knows it's a joke. The borders are wide open. It's part of the whole plan. They're not going to shut down the border, and this place will be inundated in 5 years. I guarantee you. And with La Raza and La Mecha and these rabid Mexican nationalist groups who are funded by the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller brothers and it's you can see them setting it up to be a violent situation here in the next couple of years. They can come here, but they're gonna you're going to get a little answer with some lead, but that doesn't mean that I'm safe. I'm not.
No.
I'm not.
And the other thing is I actually purchased from the IRS out of Ogden, Utah, the 990 for the Carnegie or the Rockefeller rather tax-exempt foundation. Yeah. And when I saw what was in there, I really got to go in there and start to put this stuff forth. Because, I'm hanging on to it, and, that really wasn't the reason I got it. But, people so oftentimes, and Pilot Pete, my good old buddy, says, well, why would they do this? And I look at him straight in the eyes and going, don't you understand? And you can't get it through your head. And I understand that it's hard to get through there. If this only makes sense unless they're taking us down. It's time for the United States and other prosperous Western European nations to, shall we say, kicking and dragging, go into the redistribution of wealth. And that's what's happening. And I mean, of course, when you tell people that, like you said, the worst thing you can tell them is that. And yet, Kurt, again, it's all there. And I just sent an email out, and I sent the links to Building a North American Community, which is the white paper from the CFR. God knows how many people know that it's a CFR. But I mean, it's not phony. If they want to take a look, they'll find out. And maybe there'll be a ripple effect. But on the other hand, who knows? But certainly we're at a juncture in our existence where this isn't Kansas anymore, unfortunately. Like, really, it isn't. And
well, I mean, take a look at Texas. I mean, they didn't really wake up until they stuck a stuck that highway in there. That Trans-NAFTA or whatever they call it highway.
Oh, you mean the highway that doesn't exist?
The highway doesn't exist that they're going to put in, right? They're purchasing land, and people are having meetings, but it's too late, folks. When the county or the government and the state is buying your land at for pennies on the dollar, you're done. There's nothing you can do about it. I guess you could stand your ground and be slaughtered a la Waco, but I don't know, man. And people don't. Like you say, the information's out there. All you got to do is go to the CFR website, and it's there. It's not a conspiracy. Well, it's not a crackpot conspiracy theory. It's reality, man. And people need to wake up and figure it out. But they wait too long. They wait till the bulldozers on their property line getting ready to mow them over. So
this is probably going to be a little bitter as far as an answer. But I'm going to run two things by you. One, because I've been given to check out predictive programming in entertainment, be it TV shows or movies. I purchased 3 seasons of Millennium. Do you remember that?
No.
That show with Lance Henriksen?
Don't think so. What time period?
You know what? You know how this goes also, Kurt. I mean, time goes so quickly. I didn't realize it was around 96 to 98. Okay, it was one of those...
I wasn't watching a lot of TV then. It's still now. I mean, it was a TV series, right?
Yeah, sure. And you know what? It was on Rupert Murdoch's Fox, New World Communications, which gave us a lot of what I would consider predictive programming, X-Files, and also Lone Gunman, etc. Yeah. And somebody said to me, if you watch Millennium, you might want to go back and take a look at that, knowing what you know now. And the individual was correct. So anyway, we're going through it. But one of the things you have to realize, too, that this show was one of the most excellent profiling shows, which those that came after, like, something Mars and all this, I don't know. This
a fictional show?
Oh, yeah, but I tell you what, I mean, this show was cinematically done to a T. This was good stuff for 3 years, and they just let it go. Now, that's another...
I mean, Alan Watt pegged it. He says that that's where they stick their predictive programming is in the fictional stuff,
Oh, yeah. The fiction tells everything. Oh, without a doubt. But the thing was, Millennium, when I watched it, I didn't understand what I do now. Although the third year got a little funky and made us wonder, but I booked it, and it took another 4 years for me to understand that things do go bump in the night. So my point is, we grabbed it back because, one, it still was an excellent dramatic show, much better than CSI and all this other crap. But now, interesting also, there's an author by the name of Matt Ruff who wrote a book called Sewer... Hold on. I can't remember. Oh, here it is. Okay, Sewer, Gas, and Electric. And he's going to come on the show to talk about his new release. And
his name, Sewer, Gas, and Electric?
His name is Matt Ruff, R-U-F-F. And he wrote, Sewer, Gas, and Electric, a trilogy. Excellent. I mean, I'm not much of a fiction, but this ain't, kind of fiction, if you understand what I mean. But anyway, I was asking him whether or not, he watched any of these shows and if it impacted him at all. And he said, no, I really don't think about secret societies and such, but now that you mention it, yeah, you're right. There were a lot of things that were funky on Rupert Murdoch's Fox station, which, of course, is under the umbrella of New World Communications.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so what, per se, was in there that's predictive programming?
Well, I tell you what, I can't tell you on this show because I'm waiting for him to come on, and he wants to talk about his new book, Bad Monkeys. But I will say this, that things are told, and they are given to us. Millennium, I have not reached into the second or third year, and where I was going was Ruff told me this. He said, I like Millennium, but in the third year they seem to get a little astray. And I said, well, Matt, I'll tell you what, as far as a good dramatic profiling show, much better than what we got today, I understand. But in the third year, they started to tell you the shape of things to come, which is what Chris Carter has done. I don't give a shit what anybody says, with X-Files, with Lone Gunman, and with Millennium. And in that third year, and I'll take my time getting there, we will see predictive programming. Now, what I was going to say to you also is this. In the first year, and here's what I'm bringing it to you, brother, I wanted to ask you, what do we do now? Where do we go? In the show, Frank Black is a profiler who has been hired by the Millennium Group. And when he's asked, what's the Millennium Group about? He says, a bunch of people who got tired of waiting for a happy ending. Which I think is pretty heavy, right? So I'm going to throw this to you, and
it's loaded. Does it elaborate on that, or what?
I want you to respond to that, and it's a secondary question I want to ask you, because I want to hear what you say, Cold. Are we waiting for a happy ending? Is there such a thing as a happy ending?
Once again, I want to be Pollyannish, but I can't. The way I see it and the way I call it, no, there's not going to be a happy ending unless something drastic happens. Maybe the aliens will come down and save us. It's tongue in cheek, obviously, but no, I don't see it. I really don't. I had more hope when I was a naive 20-year-old during the Vietnam War, and that sucker was sold down the river and chopped up into pieces and sold off to Ford Motor and whatnot. So and the movement, so-called movement, and I use that with trepidation, was far more cohesive at that point, and that may be because I was inside of it. But I don't see any kind of cohesion now. I see bickering factions, and I see a few people who are awake and who are screaming and yelling, and everybody else is holding their nose and pointing and doing circles around the side of their head. That guy's nuts,
All right.
No, I don't, and I really, really don't want to say that. I really don't.
I understand that.
Optimistic as it is.
Okay, I'm gonna posit two things to you, and you may think it's crazy, but these are the last two that we'll speak about tonight. All right. One of the things was I went to my wife's office 2 weeks ago before she went to surgery. I just wanted to be around her, if you can understand that. And her boss was gone, and we know them all. They're great people. And one of the things I looked around while I sat in his office was this brochure he had, this 6-page fold-out thing about the Alamo. And you know where I'm going. You know the story about the Alamo. You know the story about when Travis and Crockett said, okay, who's staying and who's going?
Right.
Here's what I want to ask you. Can you, and I think you are a sentient being who is probably a great student of history and might have cast yourself in that situation when you're in the Alamo knowing you're going to get your ass kicked. And you're asking, guys, do you want to go or do you want to stay? And so you stay. And Kurt, you're a stayer. Why do you stay?
I don't think we have any choice. We can crawl off and hide our head under a rock somewhere, but they're still going to come for us. All of us are destined to be batteries, so to speak, if you want to use that Matrix metaphor. Okay. We're all destined to be big batteries for this new world order. Call it what you will. That particular term is loaded as far as I'm concerned. There's a lot of baggage, but it gets the idea across. And yeah, you can stand your ground. Hopefully, if I'm going to stand my ground, it'll be within the next 10 years, because I'll just be too damn old to do anything except, shiver and,
Well, there's reasons why people fight. And I pose that to you because it's like, well, when all is lost, what is it, man? Come and get me. This is what we're here for. But that's a little crass. Another thing I want to remind you of. Do you remember the movie The Wind and the Lion?
The Wind and the Lion.
With Sean Connery as one of the Barbary pirates in that very strange period around the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. When
I don't think I saw that one.
Well, I don't mean to be, melancholy and stuff, but I will tell you this. What it was that the Barbary pirates' time was over. Roosevelt said steaming ships over because they had taken captive. This is not true in history. It wasn't American diplomats, but British. But anyway, and everybody in the world was in Algiers. The British were there, the Germans were there, and it was like everybody was there, and they were all wondering, why is this going on? So at the end, Connery, this magnificent figure on his white Charger, who was supposed to be whatever, he was a dude, and he and his accomplice were in the waters of the Mediterranean, and the sun was sinking behind them, and their horses were kicking at the surf, and he said to him, he goes, we've lost everything, and his sidekick said, but what better cause to lose everything? And this might be a little melancholy and saccharine, but you know what I mean? When all else is lost, you got to go down for character or something, don't you?
No, well, that's good for us. That's good for us to know that. But with these monsters writing the history books, my question is, who else is going to know?
Yeah.
Are we going to go into the, proverbial good night with nary a bleat? Are we going to just disappear off the pages of history? Or are we satisfied knowing that we put up the good fight? I'm myself, I'm hardwired that way. I don't have any choice, it goes back to, the playground in grade school.
Mm-hmm.
I always detested the bully, I always hated the bully, and that's been with me my whole life, I can't back down, and I won't. I mean, is that solace for us? I imagine so. I imagine it is. But it has to work its way into a larger mythology and be passed on to others to be inspired by. If this is the end of history, so to speak, if we all do become batteries, then it's meaningless. I hate to be my old pessimistic self, but do you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah. No, I have no problem with that whatsoever. I feel beyond any doubt. And I've said this always, and I've always will be this way. I mean, just give me the truth, and if it's over, let's get it on. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's the way I feel.
Well, yeah. I mean, once again, you use the analogy of the Alamo, and that's basically what it is: stay and fight and die, or live the rest of your life, however long that may be, knowing that you were a coward and that you didn't do what what you wanted to do or could do, or what you should have done.
Yep.
So that's my problem with the majority of society. They would rather turn away and watch television and get lost in meaningless consumerist nonsense than do what they need to do. Now, granted, most of them don't know they need to do anything, but there are plenty out there who realize they need to do something and they're not doing it.
No, you're right. And
that's the broken part of our society, is that right there. I mean, we like to romanticize about our ancestors and our forefathers, and there's not going to be any Shays rebellions against the government anymore. It's just not going to happen. We don't have the mettle, we don't have the character to do that anymore. And I'm sure people listening to this, when you put it up on the web, are going to say, "My God, is that boy negative?" Well, like I said, I call him as I see him.
We talk about sacrifice, and it's a lot easier when somebody else is doing the dying. And when you talk about Shays Rebellion and later on the Whiskey Rebellion and such, you realize that people said, "Look, I don't like this," and they died. They died, and they were fighting the federal government way back when.
And what the libertarians don't realize, and this is my bone of contention with constitutionalists and libertarians and such, is that they were sold out by the very people who supposedly gave us the Bill of Rights and the Constitution.
Yeah.
You know, the James Madisons and the Thomas Jeffersons and the George Washingtons were I hate to say it, I don't hate to say it, they were rich bastards. They were interested in power, and as you said, they were lawyers, and they were small business or large businessmen. They owned large tracts of land. For Christ's sake, I mean, Washington was a land speculator in Ohio Valley, you know, killing the Indians and stealing their land.
Well, we like to call them realtors.
You know, we call him real, except for 21 now, you know. But
he was the biggest one. Yep.
That's right, and he was a millionaire at the time. And these are the people who sent the Continental Army, or what it was reformulated of it, to go after Shays' Rebellion, you know, or were to go into Connecticut and these places that refused to pay taxes, or was it Vermont? I don't remember exactly, and set the army against them. And people don't realize that. They want to think that we've got this history, this bedrock philosophy that we could fall back on. But folks, if it was betrayed, you know, at the outset when the ink wasn't even dry on the document, then you know it's worthless now. Now, I happen to believe, you know, and in regard to this thing with Canada, is, what we have and what we're getting is human rights. We're getting human rights now, and human rights can be taken away by governments, and that's precisely what they gave them after the revolution was human rights. They didn't call it that, but when in essence what we are supposed to have are natural rights and God-given rights. Governments don't take away God-given rights. They either respect them or they don't.
Well, they never gave them to you to begin with, so, you know.
Precisely. They never gave them to us to begin with. They gave us man-made law. They gave us a pale shadow of, emanating back from the Magna Carta and British common law. And as the I-Man said, maritime law, you know, it was owned lock, stock, and barrel by the royalty the whole time, and it was a shell game. It was a shell game. Now that doesn't mean I don't believe that the documents are valid and that the concepts within the documents are honorable and true, but they don't exist.
No, you're right, and I-Man would also say too. I mean, we had that conversation once off mic, and I said, you know. But Patrick Henry knew this was a bag of rocks. Why did he do it? And he said, because he was a lawyer. And I'll tell you what, honestly, if you look at Scripture, you see what Christ says about lawyers. But be that as it may, even if you don't want to go there, I think the point was that there was a solidarity and a brotherhood that went beyond what the elites had with their constituency. It always has been amongst the boys. It was a lawyer document, and it was executed as such. And I will tell you also, Kurt, if you heard Gonzalez a couple of months, well, I guess it's about 2 months ago, I-Man was just on talking about how we have no Bill of Rights, we have a Bill of Privileges, which they can extend or retract.
we have human rights and privileges.
Excuse me. Go ahead, I'm sorry, Kurt.
I said that we have human rights which are granted by government. They can be taken away. They're privileges. Privileges can be revoked. He's absolutely right about that.
Yeah, and that's what he said. He goes, you have no Bill of Rights, you have privileges, and Gonzalez said the same thing. Habeas corpus, it's a privilege.
Yep.
So the asshole, thankfully, said it. I don't know how many people caught it, but it definitely, just after the fact that I-Man was on with it, I did confirm the fact that that's the way it goes.
Well, that's the blessing of the Bush administration, is that, if you can call it that, it's kind of a cruel joke, is that these guys are
arrogant.
They're crude enough and repugnant enough and brutal enough that they speak their minds on occasion, and we see beneath the veneer and see the actual beast lurking below. You know? Henry Kissinger wouldn't have done that. He'd do it in the Bilderberg meeting, and he'd do it, with the Rockefellers, but he wouldn't say it in public. These guys say this stuff in public.
What are you talking about, Kurt? Are you serious?
That was my Kissinger. Anyway,
Dr. Kissinger, that was your Dr. Kissinger.
Yeah, there you go. All right, listen, I tell you what, this isn't over. I hope you don't think it is. Come back on. This has to be talked about. No matter what happens, it has to be talked about. It can't be silenced. And as long as we can do this, please let's do it. And I thank you for coming on. I mean, whatever you feel. I mean, you say it. I feel the same as you. When you did email me after the fact, when Chappie was on and all that stuff, no. I mean, it's got to be out there. I don't censor anything. And, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But we still have to have the vigorous debate, which doesn't happen anymore. It hasn't happened for a long, long time in the mainstream media. But and even you can argue it doesn't happen anymore between GC and RBN. But anyway, I thank you for being here. I thank you for your willingness to come on. I thank you for what you do on your website. And that would be KurtNimmo.com?
Yeah, KurtNimmo.com.
All right, in my resourcefulness, I'm looking at my screen. I had paged away from that, so anyway, thank you for that. And if you don't mind being on this wacky show, please come back again. And thanks for your
definitely will. I enjoy the discussion because we don't get it anywhere else, and you're surely not going to get it dialing into RBN or GCN.
No.
But we won't go there, and let's wrap it up.
No problem, but like I said, thank you for coming on. It does mean something, and we'll get feedback from this, and I'll let you know how it shakes. But thank you for coming on, and listen, the best to you and yours, and maybe we live to talk another day.
You too, Viz. We'll talk to you soon.